Project 2025, U.S. Office of Management and Budget. OMB assists the President in the execution of his policy agenda across the government by employing many statutory and executive procedural levers to bring the bureaucracy in line with all budgetary, regulatory, and management decisions. Properly understood, it is a President's air traffic control system with the ability and charge to ensure that all policy initiatives are flying in sync and with the authority to let planes take off and, at times, ground planes that are flying off course. OMB's key roles include L. Developing and enforcing the President's budget and executing the appropriations laws that fund the government. LL. Managing agency and personnel performance, procurement policy, financial management, and information technology. L. Developing the President's regulatory agenda, reviewing new regulatory actions, reviewing federal information collections, and setting and enforcing federal information policy. And L. Coordinating and clearing agency communications with Congress, including testimonies and views on draft legislation. OMB cannot perform its role on behalf of the President effectively if it is not intimately involved in all aspects of the White House policy process and lacks knowledge of what the agencies are doing. Internally to the EOP, ensuring that the policy formulation procedures developed by the White House to serve the President include OMB is one of any OMB director's major responsibilities. A common meme of those who intend to evade OMB review is to argue that where resources are not being discussed, OMB's participation is optional. This ignores both OMB's role in all downstream execution and the reality that it has the only statutory tools in the White House that are powerful enough to override implementing agencies' bureaucracies. The director must view his job as the best, most comprehensive approximation of the President's mind as it pertains to the policy agenda, while always being ready with actual options to affect that agenda within existing legal authorities and resources. This role cannot be performed adequately if the director acts instead as the ambassador of the institutional interests of OMB and the wider bureaucracy to the White House. Once its reputation as the keeper of commander's intent is established, then and only then does OMB have the ability to shape the most efficient way to pursue an objective. Externally, the director must ensure that OMB has sufficient visibility into the deep caverns of agency decision-making. One indispensable statutory tool to that end is to ensure that policy officials, the program associate directors, PADs, managing the vast resource management offices, RMOs, personally sign what are known as the apportionments. In 1870, Congress passed the Anti-Deficiency Act 3 to prevent the common agency practice of spending down all appropriated funding, creating artificial funding shortfalls that Congress would have to fill. The law mandated that all funding be allotted or apportioned in installments. This process, whereby agencies come to OMB for allotments of appropriated funding, is essential to the effective financial stewardship of taxpayer dollars. OMB can then direct on behalf of a president the amount, duration, and purpose of any apportioned funding to ensure against waste, fraud, and abuse, and ensure consistency with the president's agenda and applicable laws. The vast majority of these apportionments were signed by career officials, the Deputy Associate Directors, DADs, until the Trump administration placed this responsibility in the hands of the PADs and thereby opened wide vistas of oversight that had escaped the attention of policy officials. The Biden administration subsequently reversed this decision. No director should be chosen who is unwilling to restore apportionment decision-making to the PAD's personal review, who is not aggressive in wielding the tool on behalf of the president's agenda, or who is unable to defend the power against attacks from Congress. It should be noted that each of OMB's primary functions, along with other executive and statutory roles, is carried out with the help of many essential OMB support offices. The two most important offices for moving OMB at the will of a director are the Budget Review Division, BRD, and the Office of General Counsel, OGC. The director should have a direct and effective relationship with the head of the BRD, considered the top career official within OMB, and transmit most instructions through that office because the rest of the agency is institution ally inclined toward its direction and responds accordingly. The BRD inevitably will translate the directions from policy officials to the career staff, and at every stage it is obviously vital that the director ensure that this translation is an accurate one. In addition, many key considerations involved in enacting a president's agenda hinge on existing legal authorities. The director must ensure the appointment of a general counsel who is respected yet creative and fearless in his or her ability to challenge legal precedents that serve to protect the status quo. This is vital within OMB, not only with respect to the adequate development of policy options for the president's review, but also with respect to agencies that attempt to protect their own institutional interests and foreclose certain avenues based on the mere assertion and not proof that the law disallows it, or that conversely attempt to disregard the clear statutory commands of Congress. In general, the director should empower a strong deputy director with authority over the Deputy for Management, the PADs, and the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, OIRA, to work diligently to break down barriers within OMB and not allow turf disputes or a lack of visibility to undermine the agency's principal budget, management, and regulatory functions. OMB should work toward a one OMB position on behalf of the President and represent that view during the various policy-making processes. Budget. The United States today faces an untenable fiscal situation and owes $31 trillion on a debt that is steadily increasing. The OMB director should present a fiscal goal to the President early in the budget development process to address the federal government's fiscal irresponsibility. This goal would help to align the months-long process of developing the actual proposals for inclusion in the budget. Though some mistakenly regard it as a mere paper-pushing exercise, the President's budget is in fact a powerful mechanism for setting and enforcing public policy at federal agencies. The budget team includes 6 resource management officers that, together with the BRD and other components, help the director of OMB to develop and execute detailed agency spending plans that bear on every major aspect of policy formation and execution at federal agencies. Through initial priority setting and ongoing supervision of agency spending, OMB's budget team plays a key role in executing policy across the executive branch, including at many agencies wrongly regarded as independent. The RMOs, each of which is led by a political appointee known as the PAD and a career dad, are separated into 6 functional units: L National Security, L Natural Resources, Energy and Science, L Health, L Education, Income Maintenance and Labor, L Transportation, Justice and Homeland Security, L Treasury, Commerce and Housing. Because the RMOs are institutionally ingrained in nearly all policymaking and implementation across the executive branch, they play a critical role in helping the director to implement the President's public policy agenda. However, because each RMO is responsible for formulating and supervising such a wide range of policy details, many granular but critical policy decisions are effectively left to the career professionals who serve across administrations. To enhance the OMB director's ability to help the President drive policy at the agencies, the existing 6 RMOs should be divided into smaller subject matter areas, allowing for more PADs, and each of these PADs should have a deputy PAD. This expanded pool of RMOs with additional political leadership would enable more comprehensive direction and oversight of policy development and implementation. Regardless of whether Congress adopts the President's full set of budget recommendations, the President should reintroduce the concept of administrative pay-as-you-go or administrative pay-go. This simple procedural requirement imposes budget neutrality on the discretionary choices of federal agencies, of which there are many in nearly all areas of policymaking. This simple step forces the executive branch to control what it can control. The principle may occasionally yield to other overarching requirements, such as a presidential regulatory budget, but in nearly all cases, administrative pay-go plays a unique and indispensable role in enforcing fiscal responsibility at federal departments and agencies. The President should use every possible tool to propose and impose fiscal discipline on the federal government. Anything short of that would constitute abject failure. Management. The Management Office of OMB, the M side, as it is often called, is responsible for carrying out several important agency oversight functions, many of which are statutory. The management team includes the following offices led by presidentially appointed Senate-confirmed individuals: the Office of Federal Procurement Policy, OFPP; L, the Office of Performance and Personnel Management, OPPM; C, the Office of Federal Financial Management, OFFM; L, the Office of the Federal Chief Information Officer, OFCIO; L, the Made in America Office, MEAO, which was added by the Biden administration and is not a Senate-confirmed slot. Each of these offices has responsibilities and authorities that a president can use to help drive policy across the government. It is vital that the director and his political staff, not the careerists, drive these offices in pursuit of the president's actual priorities and not let them set their own agenda based on the wishes of the sprawling good government management community in and outside of government. Many directors do not properly prioritize the management portfolio, leaving it to the deputy for management, but such neglect creates purposeless bureaucracy that impedes a president's agenda, an M train to nowhere. OFPP. This office plays a critical role in leading the development of new policies and regulations concerning federal contracting and procurement. Through the Federal Acquisition Regulatory Council, which is generally chaired by the OFPP administrator, OFPP helps the director to set a wide range of policies for all of those who contract with the executive branch. In the past, those government-wide contracting rules have played a key role in helping to implement the president's policy agenda. This office should be engaged early and often in OMB's effort to drive policy, including by obtaining transparency about entities that are awarded federal contracts and grants, and by using government contracts to push back against woke policies in corporate America, OPPM. Through this office, the director helps federal agencies to establish their performance goals and performance review processes. OPPM also works with the U.S. Office of Personnel Management, OPM, to establish and manage personnel policies and practices across the federal government. The director should instruct OPPM to establish annual performance goals and review processes for agencies that reflect the president's agenda. OPPM should also be part of the president's strategy to set and enforce sensible policies and practices for the federal workforce. OFM. This office helps the director to root out waste, fraud, and abuse in federal programs, for example, through the Do Not Pay program. It should be part of efforts to save precious taxpayer resources. OFCIO. This office guides the federal government's use and adoption of internet-based technologies to improve government operations and save taxpayer money. As a function of its leadership role, it is critical in interagency discussions on a wide range of technology issues. The office, thus, is an important part of the President's efforts to modernize, strengthen, and set technology adoption policy for the executive branch. MEAO. Building on the example and work of the Trump administration, President Biden established this office to centralize, carry out, and further develop the federal government's Buy American and other Made in America commitments. Its work ought to be continued and further strengthened. Regulatory and information policy. OMB's OIRA plays an enormous and vital role in reigning in the regulatory state and ensuring that regulations achieve important benefits while imposing minimal burdens on Americans. The President should maintain Executive Order, EO 12866, for the foundation of OIRA's review of regulatory actions. The administration should likewise maintain the recent extension of those standards to regulatory actions of the U.S. Department of the Treasury. 5. Regulatory analysis and OIRA review should also be required of the historically independent agencies, as the Office of Legal Counsel has found is legally permissible. 6. If the current administration proceeds with its declared intent to modify aspects of EO 12866 or review OMB Circular A4, 7, the related document that provides the foundation for cost-benefit analysis, the next president should immediately begin to undo those changes and develop a rigorous, data-driven approach that will result in the least burdensome rules possible. The next president should also revive the directive in Executive Order 138918 that significant guidance documents also must pass through OIRA review, because OIRA review often leads to fewer regulatory burdens, more regulatory benefits, and better coordination of regulatory policy. Funding for OIRA tends to pay large dividends. Yet over the years, funding for OIRA has diminished. This trend should be reversed. The budget should also include sufficient full-time equivalent FTE employees to form regulatory advance teams that would consult with agencies on cost-benefit analysis and good regulatory practices at the beginning of the rulemaking process for the most important regulations. These teams would help agencies take cost-benefit analysis into account from the beginning of their rulemaking efforts, which in turn would result in higher quality regulations and a swifter eventual OIRA review. To preserve the integrity of OIRA review, the staff who consult at the beginning of a rulemaking should not handle its eventual review. The next president should also reinstate the many executive orders signed by President Trump that were designed to make the regulatory process more just, efficient, and transparent. Executive orders 13771, 913777, 10-13891, 11-13892, 12-13893, 13-13924, Section 6, 14-13979, 15 and 1398016 should be revived with modified tie-ins as needed. Executive Order 1313217 on federalism should be strengthened so that state regulatory and fiscal operations are not commandeered by the federal government through so-called cooperative federalism programs. Additionally, the President should revise and sign an updated version of President Ronald Reagan's Executive Order 1263018 on federal takings. The next President should strengthen implementation of the Information Quality Act. 19. Robustly use the authority of the Paperwork Reduction Act. 20. Carefully enforce the Privacy Act. 21. And ensure the sound execution of OIRA's statistical and other information policy functions. Regulatory cooperation agreements can also promote the further adoption of good regulatory practices, which improve market conditions for America and her allies. OIRA should also work with other components of OMB to revise and apply OMB's Uniform Guidance for Grants and Agreements 22 and ensure that federal contract and grant guidelines satisfy EO 12866 and other centralized standards as appropriate. But executive reforms and actions, while vital, are not enough. Congress also must act. The next president should work with Congress to pass significant regulatory policy and process reforms, which could go a long way toward reining in the administrative state. Excellent examples of such legislation include the Regulatory Accountability Act, 23 SMART Act, 24 Good Act, 25 Early Participation in Regulations Act, 26 Unfunded Mandates, Accountability and Transparency Act, 27, and REINS Act. 28. Finally, the next president should work with Congress to maximize the utility of the Congressional Review Act, CRA. 29, which allows Congress to undo midnight regulatory actions, including those disguised as guidance on an accelerated timeline. To leverage the CRA's power to the maximum extent, Congress and the President should enact the Midnight Rules Relief Act, 30, which would help to ensure that multiple regulatory actions could be packaged and voted on at the same time. Immediate and robust use of the CRA would allow the president to focus his rulemaking resources on major new regulatory reforms rather than devoting months or years to undoing the final rulemakings of the Biden administration. Legislative clearance and coordination. OMB plays a critical role in ensuring that the executive branch is aligned on legislative proposals and language, agency testimonies, and other communications with Congress. The director should use these authorities to enforce policy and message consistency aggressively and promote the effective engagement of the executive branch in legislative processes. Thank you for watching this video. Please like it, share it, and subscribe to our channel. Our goal is to give you all of the business, geopolitical, financial, and investment news you can use from a local and global viewpoint, so you and your business can thrive, not just survive. Support our channel for free by joining our private email list, where we give you thousands of dollars worth of exclusive financial and business development information monthly, designed to help you prosper. Click the link in the description to buy our book.